Director Matthew Bowyer. And the name is just James Hart. James Hart. Now, personally, I think the skill of this film is its editing, so I'm very glad to have editor Leslie Posso here as well. And another creative element, which is also part of how this film works so brilliantly, is also its beautiful Bond-like score done by a brilliant Alistair McNamara. And no other fellowship would be complete without our great Swedish friend, still revelling in Eurovision win on Saturday, I'm hoping, Gunnar James Bond Schaefer. So I'm going to ask a few questions and then I'm going to throw it over to you guys. We've got mics, so hold until the mic comes your way and then we'll go for it. Right, Matt, what sort of Bond fan were you? Why was this your film?
So as some of you know, I've been a Bond fan for a long time. I always think, I never know where ideas come from, but I was a member of a Facebook group for everyone who had my name, so there's all the Matthew Bowers on Facebook. And we would talk about innocuous stuff like, who's got mattbower@gmail.com, who's got matthewbower@gmail.com, who's got the Instagram handle. And somehow through that, I kind of went, what if that, but for James Bond? And surely in there some interesting things would happen. And it wasn't for me so much about like martini jokes and Aston Martin jokes. You know, see the film kind of gets through that stuff quite quickly. It was more about the kind of glorious complications that can occur when you have the most famous name in the world, like such as when your name is James Bond and another man called James Bond is charged with murder who lives in the same town as you. And that was kind of the inspiration for it, yeah. And it was more when I reached out to these guys, they just came back with stories that had kind of surprising twists to them. They had changed their name to something else. They had turned themselves into James Bond. And quite quickly there was kind of a movie there, yeah.
When did you know it was a film? When did you, at what point in location were you doing a great shot, and there's some great shots in this, but at what point did you think, oh, we've actually got something here?
I knew I had a film when I met her. Now that you've all seen the film, you'll know that the main character of the other fellow is in fact James Bond's mother. And it was when I met her, because I randomly we were interviewing him and I said, hey, can I speak to your mother? Because you were so young at this age that you're a child, you don't remember these kind of things, so I need some background. And she quite quickly told me this story where every reason she called her son James Bond was the opposite of why the rest of my characters hated it. And from that, it was kind of clear that could kind of provide this film like a bit of a structure to it, which like frankly, a film about like 15 guys named James Bond like desperately needs a structure. And so she kind of able to provide that. Yeah, and she is kind of amazing on camera. And yeah, I sort of, that was the moment I knew it was like there's kind of something a little more here.
It was the moment when I was watching an earlier cut when you just bring her in, there's this Errol Morris sort of backgrounds, and then suddenly, oh, it's a woman. So he knows what he's doing here. He knows what he's doing here. Leslie, you edited the film, and the editing is stunning. I mean, every film is made in edit. That's sometimes a cliche. Of course, it's made on set and on paper, on every happenstance along the way. What was your approach to editing this? Because I imagine there's a lot of scary James Bond cliches, but I think you've navigated and edited them. They're on the cutting room floor. So, what was your approach?
Yeah, no, it was such good stuff. We had to leave on the cutting room floor. Almost too much. It was difficult to begin with. Yeah, it felt almost exhausting. And we really had to find a language where all the James Bonds, you felt that almost they had a shared experience, like they were finishing each other's sentence off. So I think when we found that kind of film language, we realised that could work. And I think the way we made it work was started off with someone who you'd expect someone called James Bond would be like, which is Gunnar. And so he started off quite light-hearted, funny, and then go on to New York James, who hates being James Bond, complete opposite to Gunnar. And then it starts to get actually darker and deeper, and you realise, oh, there's a lot more to this film than we once thought. And then ending it with Mrs. Bond. And yeah, like you said, it's like a shock when you see a woman. And yeah, it's her story that kind of ties all of their stories together. So yeah.
Yeah, it was that moment when she presses enter, the thing goes up, and then we cut to Fleming. I think that's a real editing trick. That's a real sort of. It's nearly up there with the match blowing onto the radio. It was a clever little moment.
I'd say the thing Leslie came up with was originally we actually had her throughout the whole film, and at the start it was like a mystery of like, who is this? And you just kind of said, let's just completely leave her out of it, and then just like drop her in like halfway through. And it's kind of my favourite moment in the film, where just that cut is meant to be like, I don't know what's going on here and what this film is now doing.
Alistair, you're following the footsteps sort of John Barry, David Arnold, Hans Zimmer. I mean, no pressure. But you pull it off quite brilliantly, and I've heard this score a few times, and I love what you do with the Bonds come visit Fleming in Jamaica. But what was your approach? What was the pitfalls for you? But also the glories. What did you love getting right?
Yeah, like the central problem of the music in this film was like how, much like the Bonds, like how do you stand in the shadow of this like colossal phenomena that everyone is so familiar with? But I think, yeah, I mean, initial conversations with Matt definitely sort of set us on a path where we were still acknowledging and nodding to and alluding to, obviously, that sound, that like classic Bond sound. But what our Bonds have that, you know, the spy doesn't is this like ghost in their life, always following them around, kind of haunting them. And some of the first meetings with Matt were talking about this like noise, you know, this racket that they can't ever get away from and they can't ever relax. And so a bunch of the earlier sketches that we worked on were trying to incorporate these kind of noisy, electronic, kind of staticky elements to speak to that. And yeah, I think that's for me where it kind of departs from the more traditional sort of drum party, Bond, jazzy thing, and goes to a place that speaks to our characters and not just like the franchise.
What's your favourite Bond song?
Oh god, I really like the Billie Eilish one, but
That's
is that not allowed?
No, of course it is, yeah. So we've got two Jameses at the end of the stage here. One is happy with the baggage, one has jettisoned it at every chance.
And is also happy.
Yeah, exactly. So, Gunnar, what did you feel when you finally realised, oh, I'm in a James Bond film, so to speak? What was the moment where you thought, oh, this is a good project, and you opened your life, your collection, and your story? It's a very personal story you've shared here. What was that like when you saw the first cut and the first moment you experienced the movie?
Yes, that's a good question actually, because it's a long time. I mean, I recognize and I remember when Matt actually asked me to come over to London for 24 hours. I didn't know about him. I didn't know about anything, you know. Probably he's a serial killer. I don't actually know anything. So, okay, I took a chance. I took the ticket from the Copenhagen to London, and he touched me with his what's it called? To work with you at the beginning. She got me from the airport.
Oh yeah, Jen. Yes.
Jen, yeah. She got me for that. She was a Swedish girl. She came from Sweden. And we talked about Swedish and that stuff. So actually, I know someone anyway who can speak for me if there is any problem here with Matt. So from the first beginning, I thought it was very, very strange that someone just sent me a ticket from UK to come over and do something like, you know, Facebook, James Bond guys, whatever it was. I thought to myself, yeah, I have to do something because my journey is still running on with my dad and like that. So I hopefully find some more information about this maybe crazy guys. I didn't know anything about him. So yeah, it was the first, I saw it from Matt and the story. And after that, we went to London a couple of times more, and he came to Sweden, and we had a lot of talking, and we had a lot of explain the stories, and yeah. So for my first time when I saw this editing, I think we were in Le Como, in Villa Gaeta, and the Casino Real scene, when they do the last scene. We were there, and he showed me like he cut something like, oh, it looks very good, and what happened after that? Oh, we'll see in the future. So I stalked him actually every 6 months. I know in Udaipur in India, they recorded this Octopussy with Adams and Roger Moore. You can come here visit me. I always find something to. Maybe I can help him to end this film in a way.
Has your perception of your own association with that name changed because of the film?
Nothing has changed for me. No, it's a story, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to James Hart next. Well, I keep saying James Hart like it's just like it's James. Let's go with James. I'm going to ask you the same question. Has your perception of the name changed through seeing the film a couple of times? This film took a few years to come together, to be edited, to get to a beautiful place that it's at now. So it wasn't a recent involvement, but has your perception of the name changed since?
Bond, you mean?
Yes.
Not art.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, I don't associate myself with the name. I haven't done for years. It's kind of weird being here. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun. Perhaps a few years ago I wouldn't have been able to enjoy it the way I can.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said about the ghost following these people and the noise. Yeah. Particularly, that's very good. And you said they can't make it stop. I mean, you can. You just have to take drastic action. Right, yeah. You can make it stop.
Was there, if you could change your name to any other famous character, would you do it, or have you learned your lesson there?
Do you know, that is not a question I've ever considered. That's a good one. Yeah, maybe I should have picked a different famous name.
Marilyn Monroe, everyone. Yes.
I was just going to say, obviously James was quite hard to find, and he was a little, let's say, reticent about being in this film because he'd already changed his name to James Bond, and I went to meet him in a pub, and you came to meet me, and I'd already sat down, and when I went up to get us some pints, he shifted our bags and everything to a table out the back because he didn't want the people in the pub to hear that he was James Bond. And I thought that was very telling. It was sort of like a return to your old behaviour for a little bit.
Yeah, those are the kinds of techniques that I would employ to just, not so much about them hearing that was my name, but just I would be self-conscious having an open conversation with you, with my name cropping up, if we were being overheard. So.
Matt, will you do a sequel? Have you found more James Bonds? Have they all come out of the woodwork? Or did you keep them in the woodwork?
There's no sequel. This is it. This is it. Yeah. Some people have said like you're doing like the people named Lara Croft movie. It's like definitely not happening. No, this is the one shot at this genre. Yes.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good point to open out to the other fellow fellowship in the room. So at least one hand, please go up. There's a hand go up there. Right, let's go with you, sir. Just here.
Good evening, everybody. I got a strange phone call from 5 Live last week because my name is James Bond. And they interviewed Matt and they wanted to find a British James Bond who, I'm sorry, James, I'm very positive about being called James Bond. I was born just before the first films and my mother had never heard of him. The books didn't make him, the films did. And I think it's been a boon throughout my life. I worked for the BBC for 40 years, I've just retired, But throughout that journalistic career, it's fantastic because people remember your name. It's an icebreaker professionally. It's an icebreaker if you go to parties. My credit card has an 007 on the end of it. Because you just think that actually it amuses people in an office when they're having a dull day that James Bond wants a membership card for something or a credit card. But you go to a hotel and the room is always 007. And I get the same every time the new Bond film comes out, because I've known the BBC, a radio station will ring me up and we'll have a chat about it. And I don't mind that, I actually love it. So I think it's a great name to have, and I wouldn't change it. People say, why don't you change your name? I'm sorry, I'm just always going to keep mine. Always.
Can I just hold on there? This film is about also the wives and women of James Bond. So I'm assuming this might be Mrs. James Bond.
It is.
How are you with the name?
Love it.
Absolutely.
Good, right.
Thank you very much. It is great. And can I also just say, I mentioned to Matt that I come from Shropshire, and we have a little film society there. So I'm delighted that this film is doing a London premiere, it's doing a Cannes premiere, it's doing a Gibraltar premiere, and he's promised to come to Oswestry as well.
Shropshire premiere, yes.
Really good, James. Thank you. Take me that way, yeah, yes. There's up there. Keep going.
Hi everyone, really enjoyed the film. And I have a question for James Hart actually. You mentioned in the film to your daughter that you wouldn't have changed the name if it wasn't for her. So I was wondering, why was she the reason to change? Because she was not James Bond after all, or was her name Jane?
Yeah, I was just worried that she would have a tough time at school, and I thought it was a very easy way to stop that from happening. Also, her mother had also had a son 10 years before, and we discussed it, and I thought it would be very good for them both to share the same surname. So I took her name and took her mother's name. It's been the simplest thing to do.
Any other questions? Down the front row.
Congratulations, Matt, and the NFCS team and everyone. Brilliant film. Matt, can you talk to us about your detective work with the real James Bond ornithologist? You've got some amazing footage there, and we've got Ian Fleming's biographer here, Andrew Lysett, and it's a brilliant bit of James Bond journalism. I know you.
Yeah, well, we obviously a lot of people know the story that the name was stolen from this ornithologist. But obviously with this film we then wanted to follow up on that ornithologist, and I at first kind of thought probably like nothing was there, but actually it turned out that a lot was there. And I'll explain why we're going to cover this in the film. Ian Fleming is an author and the ornithologist is an author, and both of them have books. And that's enough for us to have to teach the audience in the first 30 seconds of the film as it is. The wife of him, Mary Bond, she was actually an author as well. And she wrote a book based on her whole experience called How 007 Got His Name. And basically she told that whole story in the book that you see in the film. And thankfully she did 2 press interviews in the 1960s where thankfully the journalists who were asking her questions were asking her exactly what I would be asking. And they were just these long lost like BBC interviews that we found in their biographer's like basement kind of thing in like a box. And we played them and suddenly she kind of came to life. And then the actual footage of them with Fleming at the end. So here's the thing, so the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, they did the only ever interview with Ian Fleming, which is the one you see in the film. Now, the only one ever. Now, the Bonds showed up during that interview. I mean, what are the odds? I think Mrs. Bond knew, because Jamaica's a small place, I think she had word that the CBC were going to be there, and that's why she rocked up then. But we had heard that on that footage there was actually shots of them meeting Fleming. So we tracked down, again, the original raw footage from the CBC, went through it, and it was like, he's not there, and suddenly they were there, which was really cool. And then, yeah, reenactment was required just because we had that audio and that footage at the end, but everything earlier we didn't have. And yeah, that's kind of how it came together. It was kind of pieced together through like bits of string, but I think we just got there. Yeah.
Any other hands? Gentleman at the top there.
Hi Matt, absolutely fantastic film. Thank you very much for showing it. As an independent filmmaker, what were the biggest challenges making The Other Fellow, and how did you meet those challenges?
Could you also throw that to Leslie and Alistair as well?
Yeah, I can get this over to Leslie quite quickly. My biggest challenge was that I had been shooting for 8 years and didn't really have a film yet, and I was trying to cut the film myself, which led me into a certain madness. And I got to a point where I was like, maybe I need to ask for help, and maybe I need to get like an edit. I mean, this seems so obvious now. But I was like, maybe I need an editor, and I spoke with my old editing teacher from NYU, John Hammond, and said, do you know anyone who might be able to edit my film for me? Which is how Leslie came in, and then she brought Alistair in, and then all of the rest of you in the audience. So the biggest thing I overcame was the fact that I was trying to make a film by myself for 8 years, which isn't the best way to do things, I think. But
Yeah, I think it was always, I don't know, well, yeah, when I watched your cut, yeah, it was a bit all over the place, but I was like, no. But, you know, I saw that there was something really, really interesting there, so I was just hooked immediately, and I think the biggest struggle we had in the edit was that it felt like almost like a few short films rather than one film. I mean, we could have made a whole feature on Iskuna, like we have such amazing stuff. But so I think it was really just finding that connecting thread, which is exactly what Alistair said, which is that noise that is always hovering around them, and that's why we've used all those aerial shots of the news. It's always over their heads, and that's why we end it. It's like that's what's protected Miss Bond and her son in the end. So once we've really developed that noise theme, that we just run with it. So yeah.
Yeah, so for me, the biggest challenge was the fact that Bond films are fiction films, and this was a documentary about real people and their real lives, which are in this very particular and strange way connected with their fiction, but are real. And finding these different layers of reality, and especially with Miss Bond, and having established this very, like you say, John Barry, like James Bond vocabulary for some of the earlier moments in the film, how then do we say that, okay, that was somewhat unreal and fictional, and playing into the tropes and playing into the cliches, this is real, this is not actually worth kind of turning into a fiction and trying to meet it as the truth. I think that was the hardest thing. And it meant that I had to try and sort of develop a few different musical languages for a few different of the stories and a few different of the characters. And in the end, and sort of bringing everybody together in a way which felt like was somehow outside of this paradigm, this way of seeing them as like characters at the end. So that was the biggest challenge for me, and it was a challenge, but one I really relished and enjoyed.
Any more? Oh, right at the back.
So Matt, after watching this great film, amazing, are you ready to direct the next Bond 26? And if you are, who would be your James Bond?
Who would be my James Bond? I mean, I always answer that. The next James Bond should be whoever the producers of the James Bond films choose. I think the debate that goes on in this country about the next James Bond, like it's an election or something. I find kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, look, if they want to My number's on my Instagram if anyone wants to go. I do have rather like big screen aspirations, which we had some of these moments. I was quite insistent on keeping all of like the shots of like the planes and the helicopters and stuff in there, almost as an audition tape for something. Maybe not a Bond film, but for something. Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, this film kind of a very interesting junction in the history of Bond on screen, particularly, also on the printed page as well. And that is this whole. We're looking for the 007 for 007 now, and the press are having a field day, or the clickbait's having a field day with gay James Bond, black James Bond, female James Bond, Jewish James Bond, you know, as if any of them would be a problem as well. But you kind of preempted that. So I think this film, I think actually it's done it without wanting to. I don't think you went out and said, right, I must get that element and that element put together. But how do you feel? How does, when you've travelled the world with this film, how do the different pockets of humanity, it must have a different take on Bond, because we're in London,
Yeah.
James Bond is a very London product, but when you're travelling the world, how does that diversity and difference
I'd
play
say,
out?
yeah, I mean, the noise of James Bond, as we've been saying, is everywhere, you know, and for these guys, they don't hear about James Bond because they're watching Goldfinger. You know, they hear about James Bond because of things like what we're talking about here, like the debates that go on in pubs and the media about, like, can James Bond be this, can James Bond be that? You know, if you just open the newspaper any day or watch CNN any day or something, they will mention James Bond, like, probably multiple times. It really is kind of everywhere. And yet, everywhere we've played this film, they get it. You know, James Bond really is everywhere. As I'm sure James down the end there knows, like, you can't hide from this. You know, at the New York James Bond who we have in the film, he was like, oh, I thought it would be easier in Japan, and he was like, as soon as they found out my name was James Bond in Japan, they were the worst. And so it's like, you can't hide from this thing. But I'd say for us, kind of on the film festival circuit, yeah, everywhere we played, they've really got the film. Yeah. It has different textures sometimes, but I think they've all really got it.
Gentleman there, unless you were scratching, sorry.
No scratching.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, something that really struck me about the film was the kind of mixture of the mixture of so many different tones. I mean, there was sort of bizarre and hilarious, but also kind of really poignant and painful and chilling. And I wonder, was it surprising to see all of these things unfolding, to track down the points and the stories, and also was it hard to kind of strike that balance in putting the film together?
I might write this one to you just because this was kind of your area as well.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of feedback that we've got is that people don't expect it to go the places it does. So I think, you know, we run with the humour a lot, but then when we wanted it to feel serious, that's when, you know, we stripped back the music and all these Bond elements, let the characters just talk. And that way the lines felt almost more impactful. So especially when we go with Indiana Bond, and you know, it's that arrested sequence where they're all talking about being arrested and it's funny, and then suddenly it's not. And it's really just choosing like where to underline those moments in the language.
I'd say in terms of tone as well, Ali will remember this, that, you know, when they're all talking about being arrested by the police, that we tried so many pieces of music to get that one right, and it was and I love that final piece of music, but it was so hard because it had to be like funny, but also really kind of serious and kind of dramatic at the same time. And that sequence is where it goes from, you know, the New York James Bond is doing the ad and it's all very cringeworthy and funny, to a very kind of serious like murder plot line, and it kind of slowly happens through that sequence. But yeah, it was managing tone was a big thing. But we were like, we'll start with comedy and get you in with that, and hopefully that makes it kind of more shocking, you know. I mean, the general reaction we get to this film is like, I thought this was going to be a gimmick, and it was actually pretty good by the end, which is kind of the way we structured it, I think.
Was there any James Bond story that hit the cutting room floor? Like, was there a painful one you had to let go?
This will bring back bad memories for Leslie and I. What was, yeah, can I be honest that honestly, it wasn't so much in the cutting room where I found it hard. I found it a little hard kind of at the end of this film, because some of the James Bonds I had to kind of call up when it was all done and say, you're only in it for 5 seconds. And that was kind of the hard part for me, rather than the actual cutting of them. That was kind of the hard part, because like weirdly, some of the people we filmed who were the most like enthusiastic about being in the film, their stories were often not as dramatically interesting, you know, whereas someone like James Hart, down the end here, he was really hard to get to do the film, you know, but he had a very interesting kind of plot line, to him. But yeah, there's a lot on the cutting room floor, yeah.
Yes, lady down the front. Hello.
It's a Swedish one.
Good.
I find it really interesting that throughout the whole film, I found it really interesting that throughout the whole film, your name carries into legacy, so it really follows in through children, through tradition. But in the movie, you mentioned that just like, you know, the fiction of James Bond, you would not really settle, you know, married. And given your mass collection of obviously James Bond collectibles, what is the next step for you and your James Bond legacy in, you know, your town in Sweden? Where do you progress with that, and how do you plan on carrying your name as well, given that it means so much to you on a deep emotional level, given that's connected to your longing for your father as well? Sorry, that was a very long question. I got 3 questions in one, but that's sorry.
I mean, it's a story that's still running for me, because it's started since 1959. Every day, every morning, I try to find more information about my dad. As we have in the text here, if you have any information, contact me, so I can search for my relatives through Germany or where they are today. Next step is maybe to try to focus on DNA, to find more information about my relatives, and hopefully also I can do like a museum around the world, you know, travel around with this exhibition and go, and in the meantime tell a story about this, what it's all about, to find, you know, yourself like a person in your life, you know? And it's very important to my kids and grandkids to know what happened to my dad, and why are we as a person as we are. It's a long story to explain that, but I thought this is the goal in the future for me. And of course, next Bond movie, we don't know what happened to that in the future, but I try to collect more things, of course, from what happened from this huge media of 007, you know, every time we come new Bond movie, there's someone sponsor that will join this event for selling stuff like that, and it's a part of my collection also to do that.
I'll ask James, do you have any James Bond products in your house? Are they allowed through the front door? Apart from Aston Martin, which I saw you had.
I mean, you mean if I had something?
Oh, no, to James, to your side here. Yeah.
I'm happy for you to answer it. No, I don't think so.
Do you bulk when you get given it? Or
I don't
people got
stop
a
at
message
the
now?
door. I mean, I just don't think I've got it.
Fair enough.
I can give you something when you.
You may have spares or something.
Yeah, hopefully you come to Sweden to see me.
If you want a gondola, he's got one,
I
alright?
pocketed some of the other fellow cards that are lying around, so I'm going to take some of those.
Any other hands? Yes, lady in there. Hello, Monica.
Thank you so much for the film, it was great. So the question is actually about fathers. Ian Fleming was, you know, expecting a child when he wrote the first novel, and he himself lost his father when he was quite young, and then he got into trouble for fathering James Bond. And in the latest film, we have a child. So I wondered how much of James Bond is to do with missing fathers or even bad fathers, and was that a conscious thing? Was it the back of your mind when you were directing, or was it something that emerged as a theme? It's about fathers.
Yeah, it definitely emerged. It didn't come from any kind of Fleming-y thing, I would say, in that sense. And I think, you know, especially in the most recent film where Bond had a kid, that was considered to be this quite, you know, amazing kind of thing to happen in the films. I think there is a book where he has a kid or something like that. But I think James Bond is always considered to be this person kind of without a family normally. And with this film, the father-son thing just happened naturally because names are passed down from your parents, you know, and then you pass them on again to your children. And so just somehow with this film, it just came out that doing that kind of father-son thing kind of made sense. And kind of even in James Hart's story, there's like an element of it there as well. Because there is this real thing of like, mummy, like, why did you do this to me? You know, of all of this. Yeah. I will tell you a funny story. You know, the James Bond who's in prison in the film, you'll see there's another like 16-year-old James Bond in that sequence when they're all talking about how they've been arrested by the police, and he's only in that sequence. That's actually the James Bond in prison's son. And so we had a plotline in the film about how he had a son whose name was James Bond as well. And it was one of those things that just got left on the cutting room floor because unfortunately we already had another story about James Bonds who were in succession. And even like, you know, the Texas family of the 4 in a row, like the second oldest is like a gay preacher. And there was this whole story to be able to tell about him and how he'd like been excommunicated from the church and all that kind of thing. But we already had another gay James Bond, and so they, a lot of the time, they just kind of knocked each other out slightly.
You can have 2.
Yeah, there's 2 in there. But I think we kind of liked that we didn't like out the 3rd one, if that makes sense. I think it's kind of cool that there is a gay James Bond in the film, and we haven't been like, he's gay, everybody. Like, he's just there.
Any other hands? Right at the back. Let's get the mic up to you.
I just want to say, oh, it's weird hearing yourself back. Excellent job. The accent is amazing, and the shade throughout the story and the music. I cried a few times. I'm really proud of you guys. And my question's a bit boring, but when is it getting on Netflix? Because this is like, I know you've got a distribution deal, I don't know for sure, but I want to tell people to watch it. And yeah, just what's going on there.
I will jump in. You can ask our distributor here, Phil, from Bulldog, how that's going. It's come out in like cinemas like here in the US and in Sweden. It's on like streaming services kind of around the world. At the moment, I can actually, some of you guys don't know this, I can announce it's actually being released on Tubi in the USA on Thursday, so it'll be free to stream everywhere in America from Thursday, which would be really awesome. And as far as the UK goes, you'll have to ask Phil about the streaming, how that's going. I think we have some thoughts, but yeah, maybe not confirmed yet.
You could listen to rent.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, it's not on Netflix, but from this Friday, you can watch it. You can buy it or rent it online on Apple TV, Google Play, Amazon Prime, and Sky, and on the Sky Store as well. Yeah, so from Friday it will be available.
Any more questions? Right, gentleman with the hand in there.
Yes, first of all, I would like to say you have created an absolute masterpiece. Secondly, it's about sort of the same subject, but I'm wondering when is it going to be available in physical media?
Phil? Yeah, I'm not sure. Right now, you can get it in the USA on Blu-ray and DVD. I think you can actually order it from the US on Blu-ray and DVD. I have to be honest, I think we've been so taken up with the current stuff that's going on with the film that I don't think we've even had a Blu-ray conversation yet, but I'm sure it'll be coming in some way or another.
One final question from the crowd. Yes, hello.
Is there? Shall I shout?
Yeah, shout, go for it.
Okay. I don't know if I'm hallucinating